I'm Jamie Sanchez, and I co-created the full-motion video game Corgi Simulator 2071 for the 2014 Space Cowboy Game Jam.
I'm Lauren Fates, and I am custom painting a Julia action figure because nobody has ever gotten the hair right.
Are you ready for the beat?
I am ready for the beat. Welcome back, everybody. This is the Bebop Beat. We're back for week 2. We made a whole episode of a podcast, and we decided to do some more. How are you today, Jamie?
Doing pretty good. How about yourself, Lauren?
I was okay up until about 2 hours ago when I just biffed it on the ice outside. I'm hoping by the time this airs, it won't be a problem anymore. It is very cold in Chicago today.
Yeah, you gotta watch out for that ice, definitely. It's like Callisto out there.
Oh my gosh. I did get my my Bebop vinyl finally from the Right Stuff anime exclusive edition of the Cowboy Bebop soundtrack. I was listening to it earlier today. It's very great. If you haven't gotten your many editions that are available of these records, definitely get your hands on some. I heard you had some announcements about some other cool merch and stuff.
This week while we're recording, Seiko announced a watch collaboration with Cowboy Bebop. Limited edition, 300 items only, pre-orders only, only now through Valentine's Day. And if you have a whole $345 to burn, I would say it's a pretty nice watch.
Do I have $345 to burn? What in my apartment can I sell?
The back of the watch has the serial engraving in it, so you'll know which edition that you have, in addition to Julia's rose and Spike's gun, which struck me as kind of odd. Like, you can only encapsulate Spike's personality in a actual shooting weapon.
The two genders, rose and gun.
So that was a really cool find, given that, you know, these items can be so rare. So I hope some of our listeners got their hands on one by the time this releases.
Yeah, if you got a reservation in and managed to snag one of those for you or your Valentine, please let us know.
So some other cool things that happened, Amazon Prime had somehow put the show on sale for $5, all 26 sessions. That's not a deal that is common, but perhaps it'll happen again later on for those who still do not own it.
I don't like that Amazon did something cool. I'm very anti-Amazon. I don't want to give them $5, but that is a really good price. It would allow more people to listen along with the podcast.
Yeah, you gotta appreciate it. Sometimes people are just like hard up for cash, especially students. I would love it if some students got in on that deal.
For sure.
And then lastly, in news, Netflix has a new movie from South Korea. It's called Space Sweepers. Polygon calls it a live-action riff on Cowboy Bebop. It's the, quote, first South Korean space blockbuster, an action-packed, jazzy, found family story. So those were words that I said. Sounds fun.
Oh, they even said jazzy, like they're making the Bebop throughline pretty intentional, huh?
Yeah, and the review seems pretty good, so I'm hoping to hit that up sometime in the next week or two.
When you said Netflix, I was really hoping we would have Netflix Bebop news, but we don't this week, huh?
No, we do not. Just very tangential things.
Thankfully, we have a whole anime episode to talk about. Today is Corgi 2021 Con. It's Stray Dog Strut. We have some information about the episode, some reflections, and then so much information about corgis. So you didn't know you were signing up for a Dog Facts podcast, but that's what's coming today.
Yeah, so I'm here for corgs today. Hard corg, as they say.
Hard corg? Who says that? Who is them, Jamie?
The people who live on the internet.
Okay. But you actually have a corgi in real life, right?
I do. He's 7 years old. His name is Watson, and I will talk to you for a whole hour just about him.
We might end up doing that. So, first Corgi Fact. The actual life expectancy for a corgi is 12 to 13 years, which to me is an immensely long time. and they are the 13th most popular dog breed, according to the AKC. And I think they're only going to get more popular after the Corgi, who I guess probably has a real name, the name of the Corgi actor who we'll see on Netflix. But when they make their big debut, I bet we'll see even more Corgis getting purchased. It happens a lot. Like, remember in the 90s when Jack Russell Terriers were really big because they were on, like, The Mask and a couple of sitcoms?
Frasier.
What if Corgis have that moment?
Oh, I don't know, because it almost seems like that has happened, given how many fans of the show there are. There are tons of Corgis named Ein out there, and you, dear listener, please send us your Ein Corgi photos if you have a Corgi or a dog named Ein.
Yes, we will share some Watson pics over on our Instagram, which is at Bebop Beat. So follow us today for hot Corg pics. Speaking of Ein, though, Ein is Ein short for Einstein, or is it not?
I think you can assume that it is, in a way. From our mailbag, Brian messaged us to say, always loved the show in Spike and Einstein. So I wonder how many fans truly think that that is a shortening form of his name. Let's go with it.
Yeah, like, I don't think it's canonical in the sense that Ein is written on his collar and on his bowl, but no one ever says out loud, we named him that because of famous scientist Einstein. We're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's talk about this episode. Stray Dog Strut is the story of how the crew of the Bebop comes to unite with Ein, how Ein joins the bounty hunting band. Our bounty is Abdul Akim. He is apparently a serial pet thief, and the episode opens with him having gotten plastic surgery to change his face. Our heroes, Spike and Jet, really get the advantage on this bounty because I think they're the only people who know what Abdul looks like. They have this in with the plastic surgeon. And so they chase him down, high action episode, and even that advantage doesn't necessarily work out for them.
Yeah, I mean, if this was anything from the heavy-handed Session 1 bittersweet ending, we are getting the comedy episode right out the gate. Everything around this reminds me of films from, like, the 80s with those silly chases, or the mid-90s when it's kind of like Jingle All the Way, but with corgis and dogs.
Yeah, we get a foot chase that involves baboons and all sorts of animals from the pet store. We get a car chase that has an extremely fast transition into the swordfish, and just a lot of funny one-liners. The scientists in the van made me laugh out loud multiple times.
I was grateful to hear that the lines the scientists speak in the sub are actually the same as the ones in the dub. It's just
they
as funny.
say seems that way over and over. And also that they both versions, the dog whistle is like, sir, you're not supposed to be able to hear it. I knew that. I was just testing you.
They also get into some swears in this episode, and there's a reference to very deep shit, which I'm sure is an allusion to the dog shit they're in currently.
Yeah, Spike sets up that he does not like pets, he does not like women with attitude, and he does not like children. He ends up with one of them in this episode, but of course is going to end up with more. Poor Ein is stolen and stolen again, and then sold and stolen back. This is because he is a data dog. Supposedly there was some illicit experimentation being done on Ein that I think we can glean affected his intelligence. But you, Jamie, told me that later on in the show, the fact that he's a data dog, like, literally gets forgotten for a while. Is that true?
It is. So Shinichiro Watanabe, the director of the show, is on record in an interview saying that the cast, has pretty much had all of their stories completed except for Ein towards the end, where they completely forget he's a data dog for a period of time, and then they're like, oh shoot, So that was pretty funny.
That does remind me, our mutual friend Steven asked if we knew why Ein is a corgi. Like, why is Ein literally a corgi and not some other breed? Because there are other breeds that are popular with people, popular in Japan. And the answer is that the writer of this episode just demanded it. Her name was Michiko Yokote, and she just said that's what she wanted. She was a big fan of corgis, and she said if we're having this in the show, it's going to be a corgi, and that's it. It's not really any mysticism about it, just someone liked them a lot. And I think that's great.
To add on that, this writer in particular also worked on a bunch of tokusatsu episodes for things in tokusatsus like Godzilla and Ultraman. Also worked on Pat Labor and Rama 1/2, Gravitation, which for some anime viewers, oh man, that's the show. And Jungle wa Itsumo Hare no Chigu, which also, I don't know, that's a real trip. But I thought those were all interesting things for this screenwriter in particular to have worked on, and then end up here on Cowboy Bebop for this episode.
I'm just very interested in the fact, and it's true about a lot of American animation as well, that just different people, different individuals get to write one-off, single episodes or a couple episodes in a show. It must take a lot of work to make sure that what you're writing matches what other people wrote before you and what other people will write after. I guess that does kind of speak to the fact that the Datadog story gets forgotten, though.
Yeah, certainly. And it's also really fascinating with a show like this that's episodic, where the tone changes week to week, essentially. And you also don't really see this very much with anime anymore, a show that's as cohesive in its comedy episodes as it is in its serious tone. And to be able to have the characters feel true from episode to episode is really an outstanding example of the work of a director and the associate creators.
To your point, some of the themes we've already pulled in from the previous episode are this ship and these people being hungry and down on their luck, sort of out of money. The episode opens with a big repair being needed on the Bebop, them needing more money. So it makes a lot of sense to me that they'd go after Abdul Hakim. We are told he is the most expensive bounty of the season, so far, I believe, at 8 million woolongs. I also want to note that the guy is 6'2", which makes him too tall for doors in this show. That is extremely tall in Japan. And so there are scenes when he's coming up out of the lake where he just casts this really imposing silhouette and is a terrifying guy. And so when he finally gets to go toe-to-toe with Spike, he's got quite a bit of height on Spike, and that fight is harrowing.
Speaking of the fight, this is very clearly an allusion to Bruce Lee, especially with the nunchuck scene. In addition to that, I found it really interesting that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar portrayed the antagonist from Bruce Lee's 1972 martial arts film, Game of Death. So there's just a lot of homage in this episode all around, too.
A couple more references in this episode. In the dub, I do not believe it's in the sub, Spike says the phrase, "a fistful of woolongs," which is a shout-out to the 1964 Clint Eastwood western, A Fistful of Dollars. Stray Dog Strut itself refers to Stray Cat Strut, the titular track from a rockabilly group appropriately named the Stray Cats. Many of Bebop's episodes are direct riffs on song titles, especially jazz. Finally, here's one I didn't catch. I can't take credit for this. I just happened to spot it on the Cowboy Bebop wiki. The dog-catching van has a license plate that says NC-1702, which may be a reference to the Starship Enterprise from Star Trek. I think it has to be. You wouldn't just randomly put that, right?
A nerd show for nerds? Yeah, definitely. Tangentially, I wanted to point out also that Barbara Goodson is in this episode as the Animal Treasure Shop owner. She is best known as the Rita Repulsa dub voice.
Heck yeah.
And also voices Naota in Furikuri Season 1.
I was happy to see that her dub and sub voice were sort of affected in the same way. That like, oh, my babies was a choice that it was international.
Of course. That is a character that really sticks with me. Every now and then I'll be like, oh, my babies. It's great.
It's funny that you say that. I had an ancient memory awoken watching this episode. Punch and Judy, especially Punch, he uses the phrase shucks howdy. And I say shucks howdy, like, in my life. And I couldn't remember where that came from. It had been so many years that I wondered if maybe it was something I made up. And so watching this was like, oh yeah, you pulled it from this show.
How is that not our cold open?
Shucks howdy. I have a future cold open about young Lauren in high school. I don't want to dunk on myself too many times like that.
So we talked a lot at length last episode about how the world really comes alive in these sessions. In particular, we're introduced to a crater. We presume it's on Mars because the planet's red, and then eventually we're told it is a place where you can buy anything if you have enough money. And this particular setting is heavily Chinese. You know, we see the golden dragon on the wall. We have a reference to, a Chinese shop owner who's selling what Reddit says is soda, if you're wondering what hey su is. And everything about this vibe is what you would see in cyberpunk most of the time. But Cowboy Bebop is not cyberpunk. It is very much like a Western. So I really appreciate the juxtaposition of this realness to the world, even though it's still hearkening to like cyberpunk aesthetic and terraforming and things of that nature.
Yeah, the most sci-fi thing in this episode, in my opinion, was the fact that the city is clearly in this like climate-controlled boundary. We see the line between where red, untamed Mars ends and this beautiful green sort of town begins. Very cool to look at, very powerful, like, scientific image. But we also see the return of fortune-telling and spirituality in this episode also. So it's cool that there's always room for both.
My little Pico. I wish I had a little My Little Pico. Tell me my fortune. Little smart bird.
I don't want to know. The bird would tell me something I didn't want to hear, and then I'd blame the bird.
Another thing that spoke to me this episode is Jet says dog eat dog, which is very clearly an allusion to what we find out later about him. And I thought that was just a nice little button in this whole weird chase. It was probably the most deep, introspective look into Jet this entire episode.
I didn't take that moment as so deep. I wrote down that moment myself in my notes, but I wrote that Jet just really likes his job, and he really appears to be enjoying himself. He's on the computer, and he's smirking, dog eat dog, while tracking Ian, and I just thought he was like a happy guy doing a dog bit, but I guess you're right, it is a little foreshadowing. I also appreciate that Jet, at the end, calls out Spike. Spike is complaining about having a flea-bitten, tick-bitten dog around and that we should just cook him. And Jet's like, but you're the one who brought him here. It shows a lot about their relationship that maybe Spike is putting on airs and has kind of a bad boy thing that he's doing, but Jet knows better. Jet already has a dog collar lined up, like he has it when Ian comes home, and he just knows that whatever, like, warm spot is inside Spike, they're keeping this dog.
And that's well reflected in the ending when Spike goes to save Ein as he jumps off the side of the highway. And it's just like, okay, you have 8 million Wulong, and that's really what you were motivated by, but all of a sudden you have this warm, fuzzy, compassionate heart that needs to save this dog that is in danger.
That was one of my big questions that I left this episode with was, why does Spike save Ein? And so you're saying you believe it's just because he is a good guy?
I think there is an inherent goodness in him, and that's mostly through what we've seen in the first episode too, and you get the sense that we're really supposed to be rooting for him, even though he has mafia ties and he's supposed to be cold and callous and not have any interest in animals, mongrels, etc.
He's still very much food motivated, though. He references Peking duck, and not for the last time. I think that comes up repeatedly as something he would like to spend his money on. Oh, speaking of spending money, there was a weird dub-sub difference. And again, I don't know if it actually means anything. But in the pawn shop, that nunchuck scene you were talking about, the guy behind the counter in the dub says he wants cash. Like, if you want something out of me, if you want information, show me cash. And in the sub, he just says, show me what you got. And I think you could still read that as he wanted a bribe, but that's when Spike launches into his knowledge about weaponry and that sort of Bruce Lee nunchuck sort of intel. And I almost kind of wonder if in the sub, the implication is the guy is open to more than just money. He's like asking, do you deserve this favor? And so Spike randomly launching into sweet weapons facts kind of fits a little bit more. I thought it was weird in the dub that the guy asked for money and Spike was like, let me just impress you instead. But in the sub, it's almost asked for, and I like that.
So I think it's good in both cases, the sub and the dub, but we get to the point pretty quick that, the Bebop doesn't have cash. Spike has no money to give, and being a little flashy really helps anyway. It helps that this guy was impressed by something so strange.
Oh, cash is actually where the most notable translation discrepancy is. Last week, when we were talking about even doing this episode, like the first thing you brought up was the price of ein. Because in the English version, ein is worth 2 wulong. In the Japanese, he's worth 200, and they try to negotiate like 300, no, 280. And I guess 200 versus 2 is not that big a deal when compared to like 8 million. But on the last episode of this podcast, we deduced that maybe like 7,500 was equal to $75, maybe. And so the idea that the dog would be worth 2 really throws our entire system out the window. 200 seems to fit a little bit better.
And then the doc is asking for 300 and then lowers it down to 280 wulongs for this information on our bounties. So I don't know. What is money?
Maybe the dub just really wanted to insult poor Ian, and that's all it is. He's worth 2. I think it's really interesting, actually, that Ein is referred to as like this common breed, not worth much, just kind of a pest, a mongrel, because people in our current day, in real life, pay an awful lot for a purebred anything, including a purebred corgi.
Yeah, I did that.
I wasn't calling you out, but
I'll own it. It's also a price I paid 7 years ago from a breeder that does not dock tails. So they're purely bred for companionship. And even that was a steal compared to prices today.
Yeah, maybe now is a great time to dive into our special corgi friend. We talked to somebody more about corgis. She is not here in person. She wasn't able to be on the recording today, but we did speak to a woman named Linda Moore, and she is the president of Pets Second Chance Welsh Corgi Rescue in Missouri. She has owned corgis for over 35 years. Her corgis compete in agility, herding, and trick dog competitions, though I think technically the corgi is categorized as just herding when in like a dog show. And we asked her some questions about corgis and why they're special. And I guess, if Ein is an accurately portrayed corgi. So let's take a break from the episode chat for a second and just talk puppos.
So there are 2 corgi breeds, the Cardigan Welsh Corgi and the Pembroke Welsh Corgi. It's important to note that corgi is Welsh for dwarf dog, and therefore any dwarf breed, of which there are 10, can be called a Corgi in Wales. The Cardigan is from Cardiganshire, and the Pembroke is from Pembrokeshire. And Cardigan ancestry can be traced back 3,000 years to Flemish weavers. The Pembroke, 1,000 years. Both are believed to have the Spitz dog heritage. Having said that, there are several legends regarding the breeds and their ancestry.
Yes, and it is important to note that I believe Ein is a Pembroke Welsh Corgi, yes?
Yes, he is.
So you mentioned the tails being docked. When I was on Facebook asking some of my friends what they wanted to know about Corgis, one of them asked about the tails. And the thing is, Corgis do not naturally have, they don't all naturally have the short little tail. So Linda says the Cardigans do not have docked tails. The Pembrokes are born with a bushy full tail that curls over the back. Tails, if they are docked at 2 to 5 days old. And if properly docked, there should not be any sort of nub. Well-bred dogs don't have that. Some Pembrokes are born with a bobtail, and this has been in some bloodlines for years, she says. In some countries in Europe, tail docking is not allowed. Some breeders choose to leave the tail intact for ethical reasons, and it is a controversial subject. Just for the record, I, Lauren, personally, not a big fan of ear docking or tail docking. I think the dogs are fine the way that they are. My dog has the longest tail I've ever seen, and it knocks things over all the time, but, you know, that's how she was born. So I know that your pup has its full tail too, yes?
He does. That was a decision we made because we knew we only wanted a companion Corgi. In addition to that, it's often said that dogs who have docked tails are treated more aggressively among other dogs. So we didn't want Watson to have that disadvantage because he wasn't able to emote properly. When a dog is really happy, they'll wave their tail around, but if there is no tail to be waved, they tend to be more ostracized from packs.
Oh, that's an interesting point because tails also communicate things like submission and fear, and it just does, take away one more thing that they can talk with.
Yeah, it's kind of limiting their speech in a way.
So the docked tails kind of piqued my curiosity, and I asked about the breed standards for what makes the ideal Corgi in like a show setting. And the AKC says they look for a low-set, strong, sturdily built, and active dog that gives an impression of substance and stamina in a small space. The legs should not be so low and heavy-boned to make the dog appear coarse or overdone, nor so light-boned as to appear racy. Their outlook should be bold but kindly, their expression should be intelligent and interested, and the dog should never be shy nor vicious. Ha, vicious. But the thing is, I didn't know that there was this like soft, more emotive component to standards, like an intelligent expression and an impression of substance. You're basically saying like the Corgi has to have swag, and I find that really funny.
I mean, how else will the queen know which Corgi to pick?
Only the swaggiest of Corgis for the queen.
Linda also points out that Corgis can turn on a dime, and from experience, yes, that is extremely true. They're so low to the ground that their legs can respond a little faster, and Watson can run circles around any little toddler.
I want to give a shout out to my friend Duo. Duo asked the next question, which he wanted to know if when Corgis sploot, if they're comfortable. So like when they have their arms and legs out and they're lying flat on their tummies, it's a pose you see a lot on the internet. Like, is that comfortable? And Linda responded, well, since they really can't say, oh, this feels great, then we have to assume that it does feel great. And I think that is an honest and swell answer. Duo sent us also a book on the genetics of dogs. He really wanted to make sure we were prepared for this episode, and I did not read all of the hundreds and hundreds of pages, but I did read a couple of genetically interesting facts about corgis, such as they can occasionally be long-haired, but that is not a desirable trait for the dog's job. And they're more susceptible to intervertebral disc disease and rod cone dysplasia. Those are the health issues that might come more commonly with corgis.
We do learn this episode that Ein is just a pup somehow and still fits in a briefcase, which really disturbs me. I can tell you right away that a teenage corg is like in the 15 to 20 pound range, and they would not be comfortable in an enclosed space such as a briefcase.
The briefcase is described as being able to hold a small person. I think in the Japanese they even specifically say a small woman. So maybe it's just drawn weirdly. I don't know.
It changes scale like every single scene, and it literally, like, it pretty much disturbs me. Like, this is some kind of, I don't know, bag of holding for corgis. So Linda goes on to essentially praise how intelligent corgis are. Quote, "They were bred to work and to make good decisions. They are easy to train with positive reinforcement, training, and rewards. But keep in mind that there are many intelligent breeds, and all were originally bred for a purpose. A border collie was bred to herd, a hound was bred to track, a terrier was bred to rat. Poodles were bred to retrieve. The herding and retrieving dogs may be easier to train because it is in their nature to work as a team." I will also like to add how food-driven Watson is. I'm not certain if this is actually a trait among all corgis, but if Ein is as food-driven as Watson is, he and Spike have a reason to bond.
So speaking of working as a team, I believe I introduced the concept of Cowboy Bebop to Linda, and we talked a little bit about the Netflix show, and I asked why or why not a corgi might be a desirable TV actor. And Linda answered, from the point of view of a rescue, she doesn't love to see corgis everywhere, especially on TV. The more popular they become, the more unscrupulous breeders we see. And many times, they sell to people who are not the best homes for the breed. Hence, she opened a rescue because the dogs end up needing rescue from situations like that. She goes on, because of their appearance, who doesn't love a corgi face? And the ease of training, friendly temperament, a corgi is a logical dog for television. Considering their popularity, it's big money for producers and advertisers. There's always the money factor.
Cha-ching.
That's a little shady, but agreed, really. I asked what kind of treatment then would be necessary on set to make sure a corgi is comfortable and happy while filming a TV show, and I learned a lot from Linda here. She says all television and movie sets have representatives from the American Humane Association. This person is supposed to monitor the treatment of animals on sets. Unfortunately, they have very little authority, but can certainly speak up for the animals. The owner or trainer should always be present on the set, and working time should be of short duration. And of course, lots of access to water and rest periods. I think it would be really cool if Netflix released, like, documentary footage or behind the scenes footage to see how many corgis they use and how they live, just to like reassure people at home that the corgi is having its best life while filming Cowboy Bebop.
They essentially released the first Netflix trailer as from the perspective of Ein, the actor who plays Ein, the corgi actor. It was really cute. Did you get a chance to see that?
I did! That was how they announced that it was going to be a corgi. I think there was a rumor going around for some reason for a while that it might be a husky. And Netflix was like, no, we got you.
So, of course, we had to know what other famous corgis there were. And to our point earlier, Linda mentions Queen Elizabeth's corgis. It's said that she has to have fewer of them lately because they are a tripping hazard. There's also Kiefer Sutherland's dog named Mr. Peterson. And Stephen King has Molly, aka the Thing of Evil.
Of course, Stephen King would call his dog the Thing of Evil. We also asked if there were any particular like mythology instances of corgis, and Linda affirmed that definitely corgis were treated as mounts for fairies in many legends, like a fairy would ride a corgi, which I think is great, and Linda says they are truly the enchanted breed.
Makes sense that Ed and I get to be such good friends later on. They're both very enchanted.
Finally, when I reached out to Linda to ask, if she would do this, if she'd be a part of our show, she said yes. She really wanted the opportunity to dispel myths about corgis. So I just sort of gave her the stage to say, what misconceptions are you trying to get rid of? And she says, yes, they are cute. Yes, they are smart. Yes, they are active. And what this means is that they are not a breed for everyone. A stay-at-home couch potato isn't the best home for the average corgi. An apartment, unless the owners are avid walkers or hikers, isn't usually the best place for a corgi. And if you think about it, what dog doesn't love running the zoomies or chasing squirrels in the backyard? Many websites state that corgis are moderate shedders. They are not. They are heavy shedders and require a lot of brushing and regular grooming. They require an owner who is a gentle trainer, but no force is needed because the corgi wants to work. Aversive training should never be used. That is true for any dog, I would say. And owners who do nothing with their dogs are not the best corgi owners. Fun nose work classes, trick dog classes, and of course what they love, agility and herding, are all fun things to do with your dog. I often see on Facebook, I'm getting a puppy corgi tomorrow. What do I need? What do I do? Planning and research should be done weeks and weeks before considering getting a puppy. A puppy of any breed, not just a corgi. How to puppy-proof your home, how to properly use a crate, the right diet, and to connect with a veterinarian that actually knows the breed. Has the breeder, if you're going to use a breeder, done the necessary testing for hips, eyes, and various health conditions? And if so, can they provide you with written results? Note that an AKC registration means absolutely nothing. Any breeder can register their dogs with the AKC, and that includes puppy mill breeders. So having that AKC stamp doesn't necessarily mean you have avoided the puppy mill, and you absolutely should not get your puppy from a place like that. So that's generally what we got from Linda. I'm sure we'll interject a little bit more of her wisdom throughout the rest of this episode, but we give a big thank you to Pet Second Chance Welsh Corgi Rescue. She's been leading that organization for over 25 years, and you can hear more about it at their website, petssecondchance.org. She does note that due to the COVID-19 pandemic, there have been less donations coming in, but many of the dogs require major medical care in addition to the normal upkeep cost of the organization. So if you would like to donate, go to petssecondchance.org, and there is a link to PayPal there. If you are local in Missouri to where the organization is, she also accepts toys, beds, and other items. All donations are tax deductible, and Pet Second Chance is a 501c3 federal not-for-profit that is state licensed. I don't know if I told you this, Jamie, but we have made a donation of $100 on behalf of the podcast to Pet Second Chance. Hooray!
Awesome! Yay! Thank you, Linda. That was very kind. So I wanted to address the point on shedding, because that doesn't seem to be a problem on the Bebop, so they must have some kind of super HVAC system going on there, infiltration system. Watson, when he blows his coat, it's like shedding 3 dogs worth of fur. It is a major challenge, but also you can't be mad at that face. There's no way.
And that's certainly not exclusive to corgis. My mutt, I guess you would call her, my mixed fiesta of a dog, Junebug, she is part husky and part Malamute and blows her coat also, and so any dog you get may end up with that. You just deal with it. You love them.
So another thing Linda pointed out was that corgis are very active, and part of my choice of getting a corgi was that it's that big dog mentality in a smaller dog body. We definitely spend lots of time with him, lots of walks, but he's smart. He knows dozens of tricks. He can tell us what he wants by just kind of pointing at it. He will bother us at key times of the day for zoomies and, just playing tug. But man, nothing beats it when he wants to play fetch for 30 minutes for those little tiny treat nuggets that he gets. He's so food motivated. So did Cowboy Bebop inspire me to get a corgi? Yes, definitely. Am I having corgis for the rest of my life? Probably. Smart choice? Yeah, if you have the advantage, of a large home or a large backyard, being able to take care of a corgi financially. They do have a number of health problems later in life that can be challenging for certain ones. And, but oftentimes, yes, they are very intelligent. I think Ein was a really smart choice for a dog, if a dog were to be present in Cowboy Bebop. I'm glad the screenwriter made that decision.
I remember being a kid watching Cowboy Bebop for the first time and thinking that Ein was so smart because he was a data dog, but it might just be because he is a corgi. He traps Hakim on a boat, he dodges a net, he presses steering wheel buttons, he seems extremely aware of how to operate technology. I thought it was the Einstein thing, but maybe it's not.
I will say some of the stuff is, it's sci-fi. They're going to great lengths to portray him to be an intelligent being. And we see later on in the show just how intelligent he can be. But in general, are they barky? Yes. Oh my goodness, that scene where Ein's just barking at Spike and they're sitting in the river and Spike's like, just shut up already or something like that. I'm like, oh man, yes, that is true to a corg. Just bark your head off. Be excited.
Some of the funniest moments of this episode, in addition to the scientists in the van, come from Ein. I laughed so much when Ein jumps onto the boat. There's this whooshing sound effect, and I made my partner rewind the episode just to hear the whoosh sound again, because it's weird. It's a very strange noise. And then Hakim comes up out of the water, and he's covered with crabs all over his face. But also the animation of Ein hitting a windshield is extremely graphic, and I was glad he was okay. It was whoa, surprisingly, we did not cut away. We just let that happen.
There's also a point where in the dub, Hakim sprays Ein in the face with some sleepy gas, and he says, "Time for a dog nap." And I'm like, that's some choice of words. Sure, not a cat nap, but a dog nap. I'm for it. The writing on this is so goofy.
Yeah, other notable funny moments in this episode are the fish tank scene when Spike makes the other guy stand up over the fish tank before he points the gun at him in his face. Also in the pet store, the woman has a turtle for a hat through the entire episode. It's easy to miss, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. She has a living animal on her the whole time.
My babies!
Also, my favorite line in this episode was, "I'll pay you when I'm rich," and the response is, "Not again," as if this happens all the time.
Also, the fact that he's even promising anything, you would think as a bounty he wouldn't care. Why bother to respond? But that comedic writing, that punchline, it's so Jingle All the Way.
I was keeping an eye on the graffiti again this episode because I was so sold on the idea of the space Mexican-American War last time. I was just looking for significance. I didn't really find anything of note. I saw that the phrase father faker, I don't know if that means anything, and the word kill, which more supports my theory that it's just words that somebody thought sounded badass in English. Kill, that sounds very cool.
I also appreciate codename Snoop. Clearly a reference to Snoop Dogg, because you can't
a dog reference.
Yeah, you can't have a dog episode without a dog reference like Snoop Dogg.
I saw a meme with Snoop Dogg in it like this week, and it was just about how Snoop Dogg has finished the main quest of the Game of Life and he's now just doing side quests. So he's showing up on like cooking show with Martha Stewart. He's showing up on like the Gorillaz tracks as just a guest artist. I don't know if you've seen, there's this bassist on YouTube named Davey, and he's apparently Snoop Dogg is just doing like cameos now because he did like a rap for a YouTuber named Davey because he just got some money. So Snoop Dogg is just hanging out doing side quests, and I appreciate that he is referenced in this episode. Oh, there's a song in this episode that's one of my favorites. It's Want It All Back. It's one of my favorites off the Bebop soundtrack. It happens during the foot chase. It features vocalist Mai Yamane, and it's a song about like a breakup. It's a breakup anthem in which this person, what are the lyrics? So the lover wanted to go to Paris, and the singer of the song is like, so I took you to some French-sounding restaurant, whatever. The vocalist has been a cheapskate and a disappointment through the entirety of the relationship, and wants what little money she spent back because, well, if you're gonna break up with me anyway, why did I even bother? And it has nothing to do with the scene on screen, but it's just very lyrically charming if you go listen to it.
I want to posit that the vocalist is actually dating a gold digger and may actually know that this person just doesn't have the money but is spending it anyway.
I appreciate someone going up to the plate and trying to give a different interpretation of this song. Maybe the other person was demanding too much, and it's great for this cheapskate vocalist that they got out. You need to find somebody who vibes with you and appreciates what you can give. And if what they can give is a crappy restaurant, someone will love going to that crappy restaurant. Maybe that's right, Jamie. I will touch a little bit more while we're talking about music on the Bebop vinyl that I referenced. I know I'm jumping around a little bit. I already mentioned it at the top of the show. But my like personal review of this vinyl, if you can get your hands on it, I would have liked to see more songs on it that are these really memorable vocal tracks. The Real Folk Blues, for example, is notably absent.
Oh,
there's
wow.
also, there's no Call Me, Call Me, No Reply is not there. And there is a version of Rain, but it's not the one used on the show. And at first, I was really disappointed by that, because when I think Bebop, I think of, like, belting out, call me, and so on, right? But I think these tracks were chosen for the medium. Like, what's gonna sound good on vinyl? Because there are tracks like Rush and Spooky Dokie, and those aren't the songs I reach for when I personally want to listen to Bebop, but they sound great as a record because Rush has like a very forward bass line, Spooky Dokie is very forward on harmonica, and I think like in this realm, they make a lot of sense as choices. So you don't want to buy this if you're looking for all of your like favorite Steve Conti jams, but it's definitely worth owning. There's lots of great art. If you flip through and pull out all of the sleeves, like every surface has a different piece of art on it. And I remember being on the internet in the 90s and finding like low-res, tiny versions of these same pieces of art and seeing them blown up and beautiful like this is really a treat. And the press that I got is the Right Stuff anime exclusive. And my color choices, I think, on these are beautiful. I got a blue record, but it's multi-tonal. It's got light blues and dark blues. And then the second record is this, like, gold and orange that when the light hits it is actually a little metallic. It's a little glittery. Ooh. It is just a gorgeous piece to have and to look at. Unfortunately, I've heard that a lot of people who are not me, had some production issues with these vinyl. I was reading online reviews. Someone got misaligned stickers. Someone had glue on their vinyl that ruined a whole side and rendered it unplayable. Someone had a double punched hole. And there were so many delays in producing these records that the release date got pushed back so much. I really expected perfection. So I like my piece. But a lot of them, I guess, got shipped out, not top quality.
Oh, that's a shame, yeah. I own the Funimation anniversary special. That came with a series of things, including a certification. And I've got to play the first side, like I believe it's the A side, right? They call it that. I'm not a vinyl person. I played it once. And as someone who's not an audiophile, it sounded competent to me. Like, I enjoyed it. It was atmospheric. But it may also be the same track list. We'll have to catch up on that a little later.
In terms of audio quality, I have a sort of mixed feelings on it. Tank, which has a lot of different horns blaring and is a fast song, I actually found it a little bit muddy, all things considered. It might just be because I have such a crystallized memory of what that song is supposed to sound like that I'm fussing with the bass and the treble, and I'm just not quite getting it. But the more laid back music really, really shines. It's worth having. The one unique thing that I discovered, it's all art you've seen before, but on one of the sleeves there is a quote, 2 quotes, one from Watanabe that says, "This release is great for vinyl freaks like me." So I guess he's a vinyl person. And then they clearly asked Yoko Kanno to say something as well, and her quote just says, "Be bebop, my friend."
That's on brand.
Yep, that's it.
I appreciate that, the Japanese creatives are still chiming in on things, even years after the fact. It's very clearly made an impact on their careers.
I do want to, back on this episode really quick, make a mental note and maybe just start tallying how many times our crew does not get the bounty despite being right there.
It's gross incompetence.
We see Hakeem and Spike pass each other on the street, and Spike doesn't even see him, which I thought was really wild. And then they don't get the 8 million. I think we're going to see a lot of those. So that tally currently stands at 2 and will continue to grow.
To that end, I felt there was something kind of a plot hole in this episode. It's goofy and fun and just kind of, it's about the chase. So it's not meant to be a complete, novel of a story. But at some point, Spike shows up at this animal treasure place and sees someone with a briefcase, assumes it's their bounty, finds out it's just a corgi in that briefcase. Of course you'd put a corgi in it. And lets him go. Even though his lead was, "You'll find what you want there." So that kind of tells me that maybe Spike's head isn't in the game, or he's just not very good at investigating these things. Leave it to Jet.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but I guess you're right. When I watched it, I went, well, he wants money. He doesn't care if he has a dog, but knowing that this guy was a serial pet thief and has stolen pets before and will steal pets again, you could at least stop for a second and consider the possibility.
So that was a little silly aside. But bringing up just the tone of this episode, I wanted to chime in on a mailbag entry we have from Sarah, who mentions that for Stray Dog Strut, quote, "I've always loved a good chase scene, especially when they're fun and silly. I love the look and feel of the world. I keep going back to that, but having graffiti on the walls or ripped and torn posters just makes it feel as if you could step right into the world, and it feels real to you. This episode also cemented my love of corgis." So, I think in general, this is a really good, fun episode to show people who maybe won't watch the entire series. Like if you had to share like what's anime with a person who doesn't watch it or maybe some kids, this is not terrible.
Yeah, it's not one of my, like, personal favorite episodes of Bebop as someone who loves the whole arc of the series. But if you're just trying to show someone, like, a competent romp, it checks a lot of boxes. We get to see some of our characters. We get funny jokes. We get chases. There's guns shooting. There's martial arts. There's spaceships. It's a shame that we don't have Faye and Ed with us yet, but just to say, like, I would like for you to watch more of this with me. Here's a little taste. You can't go wrong. Pretty good option.
I do kind of revoke my it's for kids sentiment, because there's definitely a Judy in an Impossible shirt that stays on somehow, so maybe not as family friendly.
Yeah, the last time we talked about this, we referenced the fact that Spike calls this anime for all ages, and I don't think it is. But anime for a lot of people, pretty accessible. Before we go, we're supposed to touch on what was the cool thing this episode. What really pushed your cool buttons? For me, it was the moment the Bebop's fins hit the water. We see that shot multiple times in the anime. And this watch through, I'm really falling in love with the Bebop itself. I know last week I was talking about the innards of it sort of spinning around and orbiting. And this time it's the way it lands in the sea. It's very cool. And actually, you shared with us, Jamie, a 3D model of the Bebop that somebody made that you can look at online. It really gives you a sense of scale for the ship. It really looks quite impressive. So we will put that on our social media, on our Twitter, and you can see it too.
Yeah, shout out to that 3D artist. It looks amazing. So the cool factor for me on this episode had to be the terraforming. This is the first shot we get of Mars, and you get this impression that all of the cities are in craters. The craters themselves are well populated. They have freshwater lakes in them, so the Bebop can dock on a lake. And then just these massive HVAC systems that just constantly pump oxygen into the atmosphere to make it human livable. And that blows my mind from a science fiction perspective. Like, just the astounding engineering feat of maybe making something like that even possible and breathable. And ships can pass through it and somehow not be affected, even though it's just giant jets of oxygen pouring into the air upright, like your ship wouldn't fly off kilter and just go hurling into space somehow. Cool, I'm here for that.
The tech in this show is just amazing all the time, even when it's inserted as a joke, like the just married car when the chase blows through the wedding. It's a really sweet looking car, and it's just for this like throwaway moment.
And there's what we presume is some kind of Christian priest presiding that wedding, so at least we know Christianity is there in the future now too.
Thank goodness. I do have one request of our listeners. There's an iconic shot in this episode where Spike is walking Ein in front of this like billboard that fills the entire screen. It looks like water maybe or clouds, and it's just a beautifully framed like desktop background worthy image. I could not get Google Translate to tell me what was going on behind them in this scene. I got the impression that it was an advertisement for some sort of business, but I didn't get any further than that. So if anyone can read what that says, I'm just curious.
Shout out to those scientists. Whoever voiced the scientist just made me crack up every single time. It still happens years later, and I'm just waiting for that seems that way.
Well, I think this brings us about to the end of the episode, or at least seems that way, Jamie. Boo, I'm booing myself. Thank you so much for hanging out with us this week. We will be back next time with Honky Tonk Women, which is women and not woman. We check that every time we talk about it. We will have some insight next time from someone who manages and deals at a casino. So just like we brought you lots of sweet Corgi facts this time, we'll be diving deeper into the setting. When we meet Faye Valentine, what is the significance of the casino, the chips? How does that play into our tale?
Yeah, I'm really excited about, Faye's entrance onto the scene. It's the first time we get a woman that isn't this sad, sultry, lost soul, bittersweetness. I can't wait for loud, brash, angry Faye to be all over my screen.
I was talking to a friend of mine, and maybe we'll get her on the show at some point, about how when we were younger watching Bebop, we really thought Faye was #goals. And maybe here in our 30s, we don't think that so much. So I look forward to having that conversation. In the meantime, if that's all, I have a very expensive watch to try to get. So I'll see you guys later. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Bebop Beat. If you like our show, please rate us on Apple or wherever you find your podcasts. Find us on Instagram and Twitter at Bebop Beat. Our email address is bebopbeatpodcast@gmail.com.
The Bebop Beat is hosted and produced by Jamie Sanchez and Lauren Fates. Our editor and associate producer is Angela Geis. Our logo and art assets are by Kat Janda. We'd like to give a special thanks this episode to Linda Moore and Gabe Marchand.